I
Pull up the agenda.
welcome everyone to another Raw Deal Roundtable. Uh, Tonight we are joined by Hogtrail, Evan, Brian again, George, and GloveSave or Cantor is with us.
Hey everyone.
So we'll start talking about the BWO that's ongoing. Just finished Just finished the top 16 cut. A few of us made it, a few of us didn't. Evan clearly wants to talk about his game again.
I'm just shocked I made it into the top 16 after the superstars I got dealt all tournament.
Is that an all-time bad wheel performance?
Oh my god, it has to be. I can't imagine anyone's had worse draws than I had the entire tournament.
Think about how much support these guys are going to get now, though.
You just wait. Virtual 16s are going to be.
Oh boy, Mitch.
Did you
Mitch
start
Monster.
0 and
Mitch is
2,
gonna
Evan?
What was that?
Did you start 0 and 2
I started 0 and 2,
and made the cut?
and then I won 3 straight, and then I lost in the first round of Top Cut.
You know what, though? I Am Awesome. I mean, that's quite an event for him. I mean, I know the wheel's the wheel, but he's a fairly new player.
Yeah. He was Goldberg. I was Mitch in the last game. I started off. I hit 2 moves on my first turn that he didn't stop, and then I just didn't hit anything after that, and I didn't have the reversals to stop any of his stuff. So he just kept playing moves, and I just kept overturning. So
Did you end up getting a Goldberg speared?
no, I don't think I think the only Goldberg move he played was the sidekick, which he played as a maneuver. Other than that, it was just, spinning kick, military slam, stuff like that.
Well,
That I
it's a small win to walk away not getting Goldberg speared.
Yeah.
Oh, it's always a tough reversal to
Yeah.
take.
I mean, at one point, at the end of the game, I think I played Daivari expecting to eat the spear, but it didn't happen. So,
Yeah. Small
but
win.
yeah,
Small win.
congratulations to I Am Awesome. It's nice to see new people advancing, even if it's at my expense.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say it's a really awesome top 8. I'm excited for some great fun matchups upcoming.
Yeah, and Brian got to experience Worlds without even being in Worlds this year.
Right.
I guess that's what happens when I don't join Worlds. I get the World Champion deck with the World Champion pilot in the playoffs. Go ahead.
Did he mention, did he change his deck at all?
Funny story about that. So I looked at when I saw my wheel picks, I looked at them. It was Luke Harper, Steiner Brothers, and John Morrison. And I went, I'd really love to do the Steiner Brothers or maybe even John Morrison, but he's got Jinder, and Jinder would annihilate both of them. Like, there would be zero chance. So I guess I'm playing Luke Harper. After our game, Oder says to me, yeah, I was thinking about playing one of the other 2 guys, but Luke Harper would have destroyed them, so I picked Jinder. So ultimately, we both came to the same conclusion independently. And look, we've spoken a lot about Jinder on here. We know he's very good, but all credit to Oder. He's a fantastic pilot. I literally built a pure hate deck, and he still won. I broke him for 4. I took 2 more out of his hand for the Luke Harper pre-match. His opening hand was a Sloppy and an Armageddon, and then I used Restart the Match to shuffle all the ringside piles back in. So he didn't have access to International House of Hits. Turn 1, card 1, Heat Barrier. And he still won. Yes, Jinder's
just had a
good.
hunch it'd come into play.
Hmm?
Just had a hunch it would come into play.
Yeah. I think that a lesser pilot would have lost that game. They would have been frazzled. They would have not known how to react to that. And he said I caught him by surprise, which I kind of expected. But
I mean, he's the world champ.
Yeah,
You know.
excellent pilot gets himself out of a jam. It happens. I consider the moral victory that I gave him a fight as the world champion with his world championship deck, maybe slightly modified. He mentioned that he thought I was going to be technical. I was heat, but yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I noticed one thing was missing from that deck that I think would have made the game I think even harder for you was he told me after the fact he took Witty out for something else. I think Witty would have. I think you did something, Brian. I can't remember now, but you were
mm,
discarding that would have allowed him to put down Witty, and I think that would have slowed you down significantly.
because most of my discard was heat maneuvers. I was discarding to luck of the draw with the heat maneuvers. Heat doesn't remove from the game with Witty. Neither does dynamic for that matter.
Is that
Oh,
in
that's
ringside?
no. Well, that's on Witty's text says when you discard for your effect, your cards, and it's neither heat nor dynamic, it's gone.
So the cards you're discarding, if they're heat, they don't go.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was thinking because sustained is not a heat card. If you discard for sustained, they go.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's got to be the cards discarded have to either be heat or have dynamic in the title.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, it would have taken a couple cards out of my deck. It actually would have helped me because I would have been able to discard run to remove it from the game and play it when from removed from the game and maybe have a shot at continuing. But like, yeah, ultimately he pulled it out, and all credit to him. So
Wow, I had no idea about Witty Retort. Saying dynamic or heat. That is fun. Thank you for that.
Well, I'll talk about my game so that, you know, Canner and George can talk about theirs at the same time. Um, I played Keith in top 16, and as Brian can tell you, I was certain he was going to play Arn Anderson, and he did not. He played Stevie Richards, and I played Primetime Players, and they were volley high risk and just overwhelmed him. He couldn't really do anything. It was
Primetime players have arguably the best card in virtual.
that card is so good.
Do they have AW? Is that
Yeah,
them?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
managed by AW.
yeah. So he would reverse the high risk with something, and then I would just AW it, and it would go through. And
The thing about Keith is that Keith likes to play the bad superstars. Every year for league, his league picks are like always my tier 5. You know, it's like Sandman and Brie Bella, like non-throwback, and stuff like that. So him playing Stevie Richards kind of fits his style. And Stevie's okay, but
yeah, I thought me playing volley against Stevie was going to be more troublesome because he'd volley more stuff out to reverse and then just start shuffling stuff back in.
true.
But strong style also helped because when he would volley something, I just pluck one of his reversals, which Stevie
Yep.
can't do anything about. So at one point, all of his removed from game was a reversal, so he was kind of stuck there.
Yep.
So George, Glove, how was your top 16 match?
Uh, it was funny. It was good. It was a good game. George, I think there was a lot of mind games on who was going to pick who. And then the first thing we did was effectively guess who we were playing as, and we ended up guessing the right one. So it seems like we were prepared about it, but I wasn't prepared for how George was going to go about his deck. Which, after seeing it, with it, George being the worst, I should have just assumed that it was going to be the worst possible thing. And I even prepared for it. I had 3 Great to Be Back Years, which might be my least favorite card in Raw Deal because just seem to never have it when you need it. But it's
Who were you
necessary.
guys?
He was Bruno. Sorry, I was Bruno. He was $1 Million Man. So
Yeah, he went as no escape Bruno,
Yep.
and I went as Heat $1 Million Man. Not all together now though.
Mhm.
So sorry, George, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say all time George move, all time Canner move and George move is Canner packed Frankie with legendary defense, and I used $1 Million Man's pre-match card to make him discard Frankie. And he's a no escape deck, and I'm sitting here worrying about hybrids. I'm telling you, it doesn't get any better than that.
That was a good one. I was so bummed he took out Frankie too. I was so ready to drop it.
It might have saved. It probably saved him.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But I ended up changing it. I had a back to basics Bruno that I really loved. Honestly, I thought George was two of his guys were a legend. I think you had Dusty was your other one, and
Yeah.
who was your third?
The core.
Core, yeah. So I threw them out of there. I assumed it was going to be one of the two. Knew it was going to be a legend. I assumed you were going to go legendary defense. So mine were leader of the Edge Army, Bruno, and I don't know. I can never remember the third. I only get two of the three every time. So whatever. Um, but I felt like I was nervous about going with leader of the Edge Army because Vicky would you'd have legendary defense to shut down a lot of my stuff. And conversely, with Bruno, if you're legendary defense, you have a lot of zero fortitude reversals for my back to basic stuff. So ultimately, I was figured I'd go the other way, not pick leader of the Edge Army.
Your other choice was Dangerous Alliance.
Dangerous Alliance, who I'm still dying to set up. They seem awesome with odds, uh, and I just couldn't put together a deck that I thought would be good enough. So what I was not expecting was George being Heat, which is just the dumbest sentence I could say out loud now. Um, but if I went either of my other options, the non-classic version of Bruno or leader of Edge Army, Headstrong would have been neutralized, which definitely came into play on a turn.
Headstrong was neutralized for everything but one move. You played one drop toe hold.
That was a big drop to hold.
Everything else was unique.
You could have
I
you could have restricted if you needed. You just didn't.
I got so frustrated contemplating who I'm going to play as and what I'm going to do that I said, I'm either going to, this is what I'm going as Heat $1 Million Man, 2 outside interference, 2 king interferes. It's either going to work or I'm going to get a War Games Dangerous Alliance and nothing's going to work. I don't care. Let's just do it. So that's what I was thinking was going to happen. If he went as dangerous, I was like, this deck's going to be completely shut down.
Can I just also call out props to both of us, knowing we were each going to be a legend, 0 shoot lockups, and no through all these years, we just went hoss to hoss. Though I did try to squeeze in 3 shoot lockups that I had to take out 1 minute before the start of the game because I forgot it was no escape. So yeah, good game. George shut me down. There was one turn. Really, the big difference was you stopped the punch on first
And
turn,
remove the. Oh yeah, yep.
and then you removed it. And there's the turn that I let Davari hit, and if I didn't let Davari hit, you had 9 fortitude. You end up popping it and then playing a manager, which otherwise it would have my non-hybrid would have went through. I would have stuck at fortitude. Would have been a much different ball game because then moves would have kept going through. So is what it is. It was a good game. It was a good deck.
It was a good game. There was nothing at any point in that game where it didn't feel one-sided. I think it was a good back and forth, and even when you had 2 cards left and you said that's it, I don't still in my mind didn't think it was it. I think you still would have had a move.
Yeah, the biggest issue I would say is I didn't put cards overturned under the belt, which I forgot that I could do, which would allow me to continuously attack, which I think I stalled a couple turns. So that was because that was my first game as a classic deck that I didn't know that.
excited to have a crown jewel deck that didn't need altogether now to have the spots, and it was the first, and they weren't. Dusty was going to be my first choice, and I was really trying to think, can I do Dusty without 3 classic Bulldog Lariats and not 3 classic claws, and like I really don't want to play that, and I use the wheel to build stuff. This BWO tournament, I use it to build decks that I wouldn't go out of my way to build and pick superstars. And $1 Million Man is, I had a very bad run with him in classic, so I've not looked at him since.
Mhm.
And it was nice to build something where I can actually use cards that don't have chain, heat, and volley in the title and text, which was nice. So although it was heat and I keep getting called the heat crutcher, I would say it was a different kind of heat.
Hey man, your words, okay? Your words.
Oh, my word, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Um,
meant all our words.
I
I'm
think
just promoting the cards that the development team creates that they want us to play, and that's what
Right.
I'm doing. And heat will get neutered next round, and I'll get something else, and then the next thing I know, I'll be doing, I don't know, textbook,
Right.
because
I mean,
textbook will be better.
to be fair, Crown Jewel is mostly my fault. So
Mhm,
Oh, so we need to direct it all. Okay.
mhm.
I
Funnel
think
it.
I think the list of people eliminated from Top Cut is pretty impressive.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
Keith, who's been playing the game forever, Brian, who for my money is one of the best players we have, Crasher, former world champion, myself, I think I'm decent, Glove, King Matrix, Eugenius, and Jay Z, which was a very surprising result. I didn't see the game, but Jay Z, I think, has the best record in BWO history, win percentage wise. So to see him get knocked out was pretty surprising.
Trust
Y-
me, even he's surprised. He called me afterwards.
Yeah, we spoke about it. He was going back and forth between he had Andre, who he went as, and then I can't recall his other 2 choices, but it was between only one of them, and ultimately he went the allure of Andre, right? Like just so many cards, but I think in a
Happened,
tournament, hmm?
happened to me last wheel tournament. I
Yep,
got eliminated from Top Cut because I went as Andre the Giant,
yep, and
and
I'm sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I was playing against Davey Stevie,
Hmm.
and I think he assumed I was going to be Andre. So it's kind of easy to meta against Andre.
That's
You know,
exactly what he said. Yeah. If when you
Mhm.
see Andre coming, in a random game that you're not prepared for it, can absolutely annihilate you. But
absolutely.
when you're prepared, it's so much easier to counter, and that's what
Mhm.
that's what he ran into. I think. Did he get ruthless aggression? I think that's what happened.
Didn't know it worked. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So he used his ability to end the turn, and then his opponent popped ruthless aggression to continue, and at that point, he was just a kind of a sitting duck.
Oh.
Did
For the
not
record,
know it.
his other
Remember,
two were Sin Cara and Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
So Sin Cara, I think he was worried about his opponent going as 3-minute warning, which
Mm.
was gonna hurt his pre-match, and then just in general. So he figured if he won his Andre, he didn't have to deal with 3-minute warning.
let me tell you all about what 3-minute warning can do in a wheel tournament.
You know, you know,
We are friendly foes, my friend.
we seem to run into each other a lot.
So at the top 8 show tonight was earlier and had the spin for the matchups. And
Some good superstars respond.
did you see the matchups, George?
I saw the matchups 5 minutes before I joined. So I noticed how 4 people from our play group are matched up out of the top 8.
It's you and me,
I did
buddy.
not see my picks yet, though.
You and
Oh,
me.
are we doing a reveal stream then?
Sure. Let me tell me. So I know I'm playing Joe, but I did not see who the picks were.
I'll tell you who you picked. You got Mr. Perfect, Jeff Jarrett, and the Immortal One.
3 really good heat decks.
That's a
And
great decks.
and Joe's picks, Joe got the Last Outlaw, the
Oh.
Blue World Order, and the Boogeyman.
Oh, the boogeyman.
Okay,
I mean, I
so
think
one of
we all
those
know.
leads to a 6-hour game.
Yeah.
I think we all know that this is going to end with Debu versus Oder in the finals. Let's just skip to that now.
We were all hoping they'd get paired tonight, but they didn't. They got
You know what? They could get paired next round too. It's all random.
The random seeding makes it. You just never know. It's crazy.
The wheel's been vicious this tournament.
I like the creativity
Yep.
behind it though.
I like it. Yeah, it's fun.
Wheel's fun.
Yeah, this is I'd say it's one of the longer tournaments, but it's definitely I wouldn't build the decks I built if I didn't join it. So that's why I enjoy it so much.
So
yeah, I definitely got some out of my system too. Like the Bray Wyatt deck I built round whatever 3 or 4. That was something that I was like, this might have potential to win big things, and boy, did I get proven wrong. But yeah, I mean that's what you do. You build new and you see what you can do.
yeah, it's enjoyable. Takes the little bit of the guesswork of prepping for a tournament where you're thinking, what should I build? What do I want to build? What are other people going to be? And then you're just like, well, I get 3 picks. We'll just use
Most
one of these.
most of the lead up to any tournament is you psyching yourself out of building someone because one card exists and it will ruin your entire game plan.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, where it's like, you know what? I don't care if somebody plays card X, I lose, but forget it. We're trying anyway.
I mean, and then you worry about diversity and see 3 of the same superstars show up in Worlds, you know.
Almost 500 superstars, and we had 3 people who had a duplicate.
And a Seth Rollins.
Right,
Yes, and a 4th one that was almost a duplicate.
So you're saying someone's got good cards.
Maybe.
He does have very good cards.
He
His
does.
his what is it? The Buckle Bomb? I think that's
Mhm.
one of my favorite cards in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really good.
The Kip Up is
Kip
very
Up's
good.
good card too.
A
Mhm.
very good card.
The action reversal. I've been hit with that every single time I play any version of any superstar who can fact that card.
Yeah. Honestly, the worst offender might be the pedigree. Just
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
it's just a tough one to get around.
That's a rough one, yeah.
Yeah. I had to find out in Worlds that it reversed irreversibles. I thought my game plan was perfect until that happened. Nearly cost me the game.
So looking to pivot a little bit, since we have Glove with us, who on August 14th, we remember the fact you were one time ranked 14th in the world in the Classic.
I just want to say I wasn't going to bring up the numbers 1 or 4 all night tonight. I was going to just talk raw deal.
Well, wanted to talk a little bit about Classic because you come from a pretty heavy Classic background.
Yes.
So, you want to talk about your background in Classic a little bit? Like, I know you got started in the New York scene, so you dealt with. Did you play with Baron and stuff too, or?
Yeah, absolutely. That we were gosh, all right. So it was one September day. No, I was next to RG Kid in TV, and he leans over and he goes, "You got to try this game." And he goes, "Here's the best part. All it takes is one starter deck, and you're set." Well, $15,000 later, and 20, Uh, anyway, so the store ironically that I'm in charge of now and I manage now, Toy was the store manager then was one of the playtesters, Jeff Angler. He was very close with Baron. He was the lead playtester amongst Foley and everyone. Pretty in with them. I don't know how he ended up working here. Don't know those connections. Don't really care. Thankful. Um, and so from there, we would play in tournaments, you had to win the tournament to face Jeff to then, if you beat him, you win the belt, which I don't think that's how it's supposed to work, but it made it all the harder. And anyway, so yeah, RG, Jay-Z, and then 4 other people started playing pretty heavily, and it became an absolute just day one addiction. I mean, all through high school for us, a couple people fell off as they grew up and found out about girls. And I just didn't understand because we just got Devo's overload. So why would we need girls? We got them right there. Uh, and
What set did you start with?
Premiere, like pretty early day
Who was
one.
who was your first superstar?
My first superstar was Kane. RGK was Triple H. Jay-Z was The Rock. Um, and another person was Undertaker, another person Mankind, like that, and that was the cool thing, right? Like we each chose one person, and
You weren't Jericho.
at that point, no, I started with Kane because I only got one deck, and then soon after I moved to Jericho. But it was an ugly scene in Premiere without Would You Please and Ego Boost being 3 per deck. Just
True.
pretty devastating to come over. So uh, yeah, just we played consistently through I think 2006. I think we ended up playing a little of the last set and dipping out, but I'm talking played every day, went to tournaments every week, went to Dark Tower throughout the years, went to a place called Neutral Grounds in the city for their monthly tournaments, which would end up being about like I want to say 50 if I remember, 50 to 60.
Yeah, that
Um,
was the average. I was part of that group too that went to neutral ground.
awesome.
The, they
Neutral. I love
yeah
neutral. Yeah.
yeah they topped out for the world qualifier in New York at about like 120 or something like that.
Yeah,
Like it was a
to
madhouse.
I went to I think 2 of the world qualifiers at Neutral Ground, and it was crazy.
One of my favorite places, just so I still remember it so vividly. Would crush like 18 hot pockets just out of their freezer throughout the course of a day. So yeah, it was just a lot of nights with the boys grinding through every set. At one point, we ended up becoming playtesters during the Divas era. That's where Jay-Z ended up discovering what I thought was the better of the 2 Goldberg decks, but I know there were 2. Um, and I don't know how he thought of it. I don't know how he did it, but it was just a lot of the peaks have their own type of bad, but that Goldberg deck, there wasn't anything you can really do about it. And that was one of the first times in Raw Deal where I was a little turned off. Divas was probably the set I played the least, just because RG and Jay-Z would go back to their house after school and just sling game after game after game, Stacy versus Goldberg, and it made them so much better players. I'm jealous of it, but I ended up just like going to work because I'm like, what am I going to do against Goldberg? I just can't. I cannot beat this thing. There's no point. I'm going to skip my first 3 turns. He's just going to jackhammer me over and over until he has enough for the spear, and then the Goldberg's jackhammer. Like it
So
was just a massacre.
what was the Goldberg deck?
Effectively, would just try and see as much of the deck as possible in the pre-match. He would triple high fives, pick up good times and Pat and Jerry's. He would Pat and Jerry you consistently. There wasn't volley this. He would get rid of rules because no show wasn't out. He
I think that was
would
Sidewalk Slam too.
pre-sidewalk slam and all of it. It
Yep.
was the wild wild west for actions. People had bring its, but heel was pretty prevalent at that time with clutch apply. Face. I think
Stranglehold.
yeah,
Ma-
stranglehold,
managers.
manager. Which I think if you're summing up the game of Raw Deal, I think manager interferes is the like to me what I would nominate as the most timeless best card in all of Raw Deal. I used to say elbow, but we've moved a little beyond elbow. So he would just pummel you. There wasn't a lot that you can do. I think he might have had hand disruption. It's possible, but
Was that
ultimately just
Tables
seal a lot.
Goldberg? I remember there being a Tables Goldberg back in the day.
So he didn't have that one. Tables Goldberg was the other version, which was Premier Raw throw tables with dance coach at 0. Road wasn't there. And he would just get your hand down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, but just you really felt the pressure with Zenda's deck. So I just remember it very vividly being one of the most helpless I've ever felt in any matchup in Raw Deal.
It's the reason why this was created, wasn't it?
That is
That entire
absolutely
era,
correct.
yes.
That is absolutely correct. So yeah,
You were-
we were close with Baron. Tom McKelvey was a big part of the game. He was, we were in a group with him. They became Poison Clan, I think was their name.
Yeah, that was the name.
Yeah, with Reskin and all of them. But we loved doing our thing. We thought we could have. Poison Clan was a fantastic group. Same with Dark Tower, but we always thought we can hang with any of them.
And your peak ranks, the three of you.
Ironically,
Where you guys peaked.
Zenda was ranked best in the world when we were at our absolute heaviest. That was a little either like in the Divas era or a little after. Because that's when I think it was a little after around Armageddon. Because that's when I was playing Renee. I top 8'd at Wizard World East, and I'm still still a little salty about it. Went up against an A train as Renee. Normally I Showtime Beefy and Trash Talk away their step reversals, step aside, and then I'd lariat them to start. And between what Renee does, right, Beefy reversals stack up. It's too much to handle. I was mono grapple, which at the time there wasn't a lot of kind of stoppage on that if you're able to get going. But he drew 3 step asides in his opening hand, so I could not get rid of them all, and I couldn't do my lariat plan. This was pre Journey Slam. So top 8 at Wizard World East. At that point, I was ranked 14th. RG was 4, and Zenda was 1. But look, it's a snapshot in time. It's
Still impressive for the time because there was a significant amount of people playing the game compared to.
Oh yeah.
yeah, it
don't
was like
remember-
2005. Yeah.
I don't remember who said it, but someone recently said, and now we're all top 14.
Yeah. Brian, you were pretty heavy in the classic area too, playing, weren't you?
Yes, I started in somewhere between SummerSlam and Ruthless Aggression. We spent a lot of time, my friend group and I, Crasher, the late Mike Anstedt, and Steve LaFlame. We would sit in each other's basements and just throw cards all day long. We kind of it kind of mirrored what Glove was talking about. We each kind of picked superstars. I think the first one I was confident bringing to tournament was Right to Censor. I know Crasher started with Booker T. He was a huge Booker T fan in real life, so it translated well to the card game. I think Anstedt started with Stone Cold. He eventually would get to Goldberg, and he won Neutral Ground in I want to say 2004 or 2005 with Goldberg. It must have been 2005 if that was Divas era.
Mm-hmm.
But
No, Divas was 2004.
okay, so
Armageddon was
2004.
2005. Yep.
So 2004, he won Neutral Ground. So with
Huh.
Goldberg, and it was a weird one. It was not necessarily it was Premier Raw, but it wasn't necessarily tables. It was actually pain reversals. So he would get on the board and he would get rid of your hand, and if you threw something, he would hit you with I want to say it was a spine buster
Mhm.
or like a whatever there was at the time. And spine
Indian
buster
Death.
was definitely grapple, but Deathlock, yeah, that was another one. 360 clothesline was in there.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's Goldberg. He had no non-hybrid reversals, so just throw them all in there.
BP,
But
did you find that your play group, like every set, weirdly enough, we never had a lot of overlap in like fighting for superstars. It always pretty kind of settled into like, oh, divas. I was like, I'm a Victoria girl. I love Victoria. I'm taking her, and it always seemed to work itself out that it was very diverse enough that there was not a lot of like fighting over superstars.
absolutely worked the same way with us.
Yeah.
When a new set would come out, we'd each kind of cherry pick it, usually based on fandom, because we were all watching Raw every week, and we watched WCW growing in various stages of growing up. So it was all like, we loved these people on the screen, and
Mhm.
that would kind of drive who we chose at first.
Mhm.
As we got closer to the end of Classic, it started being more about mechanics. But
Yeah.
at the beginning, it was all wrestling fandom.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So
I
what?
wasn't the biggest Rene Dupree fan in the world.
So Brian, what was one of your top achievements then in Classic?
I at the truth at WrestleMania 21 in Los Angeles, I was Mike Ansted's second for that trip. You got to bring one person with you as part of the WrestleMania trip. I won the side event for a Triple H signature that weekend. So I mean, I think that was my biggest win. I also count being in the finals of Dark Tower twice as pretty high on the list, but
Dark Tower
neither one of
is.
those. Yeah. Outside of Qualls, Dark Tower might have been one of the toughest places in the world to play.
I do agree with that. And I think they really came on towards the end. Correct me if I'm wrong. Really, like 2000. I don't even think 4. I want to say 5 is really when they started to hit their absolute peak. Um, when you went to Dark Tower, you know, you knew you were in for something, and not like in top cuts. So in
Mm,
in the top
Every
cut,
round.
every
Yeah.
round you're going to be in for something.
Consistent 5 round tournaments, and just about everybody who showed up was a banger. Like
Hmm.
everyone could go.
Actually, I have to call out McKelvey if he ever watches this, because every time I got to a tournament with Jay-Z, I would drive with him, and then he would pair me and Jay-Z up in the first round. I think 5 straight tournaments I faced Jay-Z in the first round. So I think maybe I could have been 13 guys. I'm just saying.
Could have been.
I still vividly remember people in other tournaments accusing that software of cheating.
Mm,
It's I don't know how they made it happen, but like, or how they thought it would happen, but those accusations always came around. I remember we McKelvey wasn't there, but we were running a tournament in a Staten Island store,
mm,
and it was Crasher running the software, and the software spits out the top 8. And one of the guys that was a local in Staten Island, where we were from Jersey at the time, didn't make it, and he got pissed off, and he accused Crasher of hacking the software to get his friends into top 8, which is the funniest thing ever, because the last thing he'd do is give Anstead or I a pass into the top 8.
mhm.
Like,
Right.
he'd make we'd have to earn it more so, you know.
What was the name of the store in Staten Island?
Oh, I don't remember. Was it Alternate Realms? Maybe
That does sound like a familiar store name. I know
it
Comic
was.
Book Depot in Long Island. I think that's might be something like Long Island.
That is, yeah, I went there a lot. That is, I think that's considered Wantagh at that point in New York. It's
Uh,
on that Belmore Wantagh border. My wife is actually originally from Belmore.
oh,
Not that there's a connect. So like, I was already out there a lot anyway for Dark Tower, for Comic Book Depot, which was another tough place to play. Paul Vereno, former world champion,
yeah.
that was his home
That was the
stead.
only tournament I won that I was able to take home. I won a Comic Book Depot event,
Nice, nice.
smaller one.
Who were you?
Premier Raw HBK.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my favorite decks to play is, because I got to blend being someone I really liked, HBK, into something that, look, Premier Raw was really good. I don't want to undersell it, but
Mhm.
I didn't think it was necessarily the best deck out there. Um, but it was, still good. One with the Heartbreak Kid when he had no hand. And I think I had no fortitude, but I was just chucking fish offs and ratings boosters, and it's kind of ugly.
The Blue Wave era.
Did you say you want to back Triple H backstage sig, Brian? Is
I
that what you
did.
said?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
You still own it?
Yep.
2 of 10. I know 2 of 10 now. And now we got to figure out where the other 8 are.
I gotta see if I have one. I have a bunch.
Do
Who
you?
I don't know if I have that one, but I do have a number of signatures.
That one
Triple
was
H and
extremely
Orton.
hard to come by.
Triple H and Orton only signed 10 of them each because they had to leave. They had to get up and leave, I guess, something. And Triple H in general doesn't sign a lot of things. So
I'll check after, and then George, maybe we can do some business.
yeah, those days are long gone. But that one I might have to make an exception for because that one is, I mean, I don't know. We can't let it go to Chile, so we got to make sure it stays around here.
So,
But
who
I
did you
know
play?
that one's people. It's been a myth. I would never believe it existed if Rob Zeta wasn't in Mass and actually shown up to tournaments because he owns Baron's master set. Like he inherited Baron's master set after he passed, and he would bring that to show, which is the only one I've ever seen, which was great. But and
What,
he has Orton too, so I've seen both of them in person. But that's as far as I've seen them. That's it.
Brian? What deck did you play in that
It
WrestleMania
was a
event?
draft event, actually. It was a double draft.
Wow.
So this, if I remember my history, this was the beginning of people doing raw drafts, which is you get 6 packs and you bid on them or something like that. My first round, I got Mania Booker T with packs. So at that point, I was just like, okay, I'm set here. I'll take this. The second round was done pure starters, the 3 finalists, and it was like lotteried off the 3 starters. I got Jeff Hardy from Survivor Series 2. Somebody got Paul Heyman, and another guy got Big Show. And the way the finals went is that we went round robin 3 times, and we just kept going 1-1. Jeff Hardy would beat Big Show and lose to Paul Heyman. Big Show would beat Paul Heyman, lose to Jeff Hardy. So finally, at the end, I forget the signatures that were up for grabs, but there were three big ones. It was Triple H, Eddie, and a third one. And the Heyman guy says, "I'm just here for the other signature. I'll drop if you guys let me have that." So we did, and I ended up winning the final game, Jeff Hardy versus Big Show. It took a minute, but finally, you get from the top rope and then high risk, dead. So that was the I guess technically it was Booker T and Jeff Hardy at that point.
Was that when Big Show confronted Baron about his
It,
state in the game?
it was that weekend. Another funny story, if that's never been told, I was witnessing that, if you guys want to hear it.
Yeah.
So we're in the hotel in Los Angeles. It's just outside Universal, and it's where all the people for WrestleMania stayed. Like we saw Undertaker, we saw Kurt Angle, we saw Vince playing with his grandkids. Like everybody was there. And we're at breakfast, and at the time we're waiting in the lobby for Baron and a couple other people to finish the breakfast buffet that they were having. And Big Show happened to walk up, and I'll say this: Big Show's really cool. Like at least in 2005, he had plenty of time to hang out with us. He chatted with us. We told him stories about everything. He was very cool to hang out with. At some point, I believe it was Wes Victory who said to him, "Yeah, last year or whatever, I won the world championship with your deck, but now you kind of suck." And then he's like, "What?" And you can see he's getting into character. "Who do I have to talk to get this fixed?" And at that moment, Baron was walking out of the buffet area, and everybody in the lobby went, "That guy." And so Baron, I think he was 6'8", is like walking out of there, and Big Show's like, "You come here. You and I have to settle something." And then the conversation got a little bit lighter. I think one of the lines Big Show used was, "What do I have to do? Do a freaking super kick? Do a moonsault? What do I have to do to get good at this game?" Like he was actually arguing to get good at the game. And then funny story is that later that year, Largest Athlete came out. No coincidence whatsoever. None.
Big Show's a gamer, right? I know he played Destiny for a while. I don't know if there's any Destiny people. but he was like always playing this very popular PlayStation game and tweet about it. It's funny.
I didn't know Baron was 6'8". That's an interesting fact. I didn't realize he was so tall.
He was a big
Yeah,
guy.
he
Baron
was
was
much. He was
big.
big,
Big.
both ways.
Hmm.
So Evan, how about you? You have any interesting classic stories or?
Um, I'm fairly confident. I think I'm the youngest person here. I'm 36. I started in Premiere, so I was 12 when I started. Um, Kane was my first superstar. My friends and I used to hang out at this comic book store downtown where I'm from, and we were all huge wrestling fans. And then one day they just had starter decks of Raw Deal. I go, "What's that?" And the guy who owns the shop, he's like, "Oh, it's this new game just came out. Like here, $10, and we can play a test game." So I was hooked instantly. Um, Hellfire and Brimstone was my first ultra rare, which I think determined why I chose Kane as like my first superstar. Um, but yeah, my play group was like 7, 8 people, give or take. We played all throughout Classic. Before stopped right when Great American Bash kind of came out. Like I remember my friend and I used to split a case every set. Um, and then we would kind of draft the ultra rares that we pulled. So it's like, oh, I want to build Mickey James. So I'm gonna take her cards first, and then my friend wants to build Bobby Lashley. So and we just go back and forth picking ultra rares out of this case. Um, yeah, we had tournaments, but they were kind of small events. Made it down to New York City twice. I think I went 2 and 3 with Chris Benoit, and then I think the next year I think I went 3 and 2 with Spirit Squad, but I didn't make top cut. I think. Um, yeah. And then I mean I don't have necessarily a claim to fame as far as classic Raw Deal goes. I used to be on the old Team Canada making fantasy cards all the time, which I mean here I am on the dev team now, so I I guess it paid off.
Practice,
Um,
practice, practice.
I won my first tournament with China when I must have been 12 or 13. It was right when Fully Loaded came out. I remember I won with shoulder block as a reversal
Oh yeah, baby.
against a Triple H who played Irish Whip into something that wasn't leaping knee to the face. Um, and I won the +3 classic belt. So that was cool. Um, Chris Benoit and then the Crippler were my guys, which looking back now is a little unfortunate, but they were my guys for most of it. And then we had the Rob Van Dam guy. We had the Rock guy. Right to Censor. My one buddy would just wreak havoc with Right to Censor when they came out.
It was ugly.
Eddie Guerrero, like I just remember all phases of this game, and yeah. And then in like 2013 or so, I was moving and I just found my raw deal cards in the bin somewhere. And I go, oh, that's weird. So I messaged my one friend who we used to play with, and I guess he was big in like the Magic the Gathering local scene. So I was like, you want to play a game of raw deal just to see how it is? He was like, yeah, sure. So then I started playing him like once a week. Just the two of us would build like 4 decks each. Um, and then I found out about virtual, and then we started slowly getting into that, and here we are now. So I've been playing this game a while, and it's been what 2/3 of my life.
How about you, George?
Mine's very uneventful. It was very brief. So we were playing Nitro, and I pulled a Sting, and I was the only one at my store to pull Sting. Goldberg and Bret Hart were better just because they had higher hand sizes, because that's what it was all about at the time. And then Raw Deal comes out, and we're like, oh, okay, what, the comic guy's showing us and they're teaching the game, and we look at the ability, and the fact that abilities were once a turn, not once a game. We're like, oh my god, once a turn, and we all jumped in. So, as most of you know, I'm a big family. So 6 Hashems were all playing Raw Deal. We had a play group just on our own. So, but I was the oldest, so I had a job, so I got Undertaker. I think he was $12 instead of 10. Clute was Triple H. Not surprising. My brother Andrew was Stone Cold. My cousin Jeff was The Rock. And then my cousin Justin was Kane, and my brother Jeremy was Mankind. So we had everyone but Jericho. Sorry, Canner, but we had everybody but Jericho in the first round. And sure enough, it was Clute and I for a majority part, mainly because I worked so I could buy boosters. So I had 3 managers, and Clute had also was able to get 3 managers while everyone was kind of still playing with 1. Because I'm not sure if you guys remember, but it was only 1 per box at the time. And we weren't buying boxes, we were buying
One manager?
Yeah.
There rare cases of 2, but yes, the distribution was pretty heavily weighted towards Shane O'Mac.
Yeah. 2 foils in the box and whatever. And we used to know where the foils would be, how many packs down, and the comic guy caught on and he'd start shuffling the packs when he'd open a new box, so it didn't work out. And I didn't get any further than my local play store. I was only 14 and everyone else was younger, and our parents were not going to be driving us 2-3 hours to random tournaments. And we went as far as Backlash. We got to Backlash. And then we started to fizzle out. I think mainly the comic. I think the guy that owned the store couldn't really explain how Backlash worked, and I don't know if we were playing it right, but definitely when I was seeing Fans Love an Underdog, which I get later learned that was actually the only card that was ever officially banned until Surge came out. But Fans Love an Underdog Taz just completely made me not love this game. And Fast and Furious came out, and I was getting my license, and I said, forget this. And I switched my hobby to cars, and I didn't get back to Raw Deal until 2018, similar to what you said, Evan. I always knew where my cards were. I had them in, like, every time I moved, I had like a binder and it was in a box and whatnot. But we found a box of all the old commons and uncommons. And then I think my cousin Jeff also did. And all of a sudden, starts sparking up playing the game. And then we're like, oh, we need a little more. We're looking and we're like, wait, what's chain? What is this? Heat? What's volley? And then, next thing you know, you're down the rabbit hole. And being business minded first, I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend an arm and a leg buying Raw Deal if the game's dead. How can I do this without it costing me a dime? And that's actually why I got into the buying and selling game. I'd buy collections, pick what I want, sell it till break even, then buy another collection and do the same thing over and over again. And I think most of you know how the story went. It definitely blew up way more than I expected, but I bought McKelvey's collection. It's funny you say that. I bought Pulverino's collection. I bought like Steve Rust's collection. Like,
You bought my friend's collection, then I delivered to you.
so many collections that I think you can't hear these names, and I'm like, oh, that's who that is, and had no idea. And they're all sitting in these blurry boxes behind me in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, so that's how my story went. And
So
I learned that I had been playing the game completely wrong because of Evan at a sealed deck tournament.
I was gonna say, was that sealed deck tournament where I met you? Was that like your first time like back?
That I was fairly new. I was back fairly new, yeah. And Luke had saw that we got back into it. We had been talking to him, and I wasn't back very long. And I had never been in a sealed deck tournament. So I had no idea how it worked. And I had a great deck, and I think had I known how it worked, it probably would have ended better. But But
Your brother won that tournament, didn't he?
he came in second. He got a JBL deck and he came in second. But Will Alessi, who was one of the hosts for the tournament, because he was the backpacker we started buying off of, was in Central Mass. He pulled a God pack in his draft, and he got Dude Love with Richazo, something like that.
We had
We ended up
Oh,
withdrawing
it was
himself from
Ozzy.
the tournament.
Okay.
he got both a mid-match reversals.
Oh, nice.
He got Rashazo, and then he got Essay as well in a different pack.
With Dude Love, and it was just, yeah. And but he withdrew from the tournament, and for that, because he was hosting it. But yeah, my brother came in second with Heat JBL.
I think I lost to your brother in top 4.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that I sealed Heat JBL deck that's hard to not.
I got the Shawn Michaels starter, which doesn't have From the Top Rope in it, but it has 5 split finger locks.
And doesn't it not have 75 cards? Or
It does not. It has 60 cards, but luckily in the packs I pulled the Heat Seekers, so I switched to them, and that was much better. And I pinned George with slingshot into the ring post as a reversal.
I was your freaking hero, and there were certain cards I just didn't realize you could. That would be better in a sealed tournament. But also, I'm like, well, it's chain. It can only stop so many, and Evan stopped every single chain move. So, and that's when I learned chain might have not been. Chain was obviously very good, but at least in that tournament, it was not very good. But yeah, that's my story. Very brief. Never any major tournaments. Just bragging rights through the family, and lots of crap talking to each other. And most of the time, that never changed. It was Flute and I, Triple H, Undertaker, then in Fully Loaded, China, Rikishi, kept going, and then and I can't remember who we were in Backlash. I think we stayed as Rikishi and China, and it just, yeah, always. And 20 years later, it still happens to this day. So
George, what you're saying is you ducked Raw Deal for 15 years.
I did. I ducked it for 15 years. I would look at that binder with all my cards in it. I'd close it right back up, put it back in the box, and never even knew the game continued as long as it did. Not that it was very long, but there was so much I missed out on. And
it's funny you Backlash was, because I know I guess it could be divisive with the introduction of Backlash deck cards. It's just funny because I remember Backlash coming out very vividly for the fact that I wasn't there on release. It came out during the summer, and I was actually away at sleepaway camp, and there was like a little payphone area that you can call your parents on, but I didn't call my parents. I called RG Kid, and he started telling me about the set, and he's like, dude, the cards are sideways. And I'm like, no way. I'm like, I gotta get home. And he's like, yeah. And our friend Mark, he's like, and Mark pulled a hot pack. He got Brahma Bull. He's like, you gotta see this picture. So like, I remember that impact. It was the first time, I played Pokemon, I played Magic, but I didn't stick around those games long enough. This I saw like the evolution of the card game, which I thought was just really, really, really interesting. I loved the mechanic of it, that it allowed you to kind of get started, because I feel like I always played bad decks in Classic, so I was just felt always behind. You want to always end up preparing.
Brian, did you play virtual from the beginning, or did you come in like in the middle somewhere?
No, I started Virtual when Virtual 1 came out. That was actually where I won my first Dark Tower, was the original Mr. Perfect. So like he was stupid. He's good still, but he was stupid back then, especially Volley.
When?
And Virtual 1.
Sorry, BP, I'm curious. I didn't realize Dark Tower was open for so long. I only remember driving back there one day and it was gone. So I was
Yeah.
bummed about it. How long did Dark Tower make it?
I don't remember when it closed. I want to say maybe Virtual 3. I'd have to check that though. Like I
That
don't have a firm date.
fascinating.
Dark Tower is like a 45-minute drive, which at the time was a lot. So like it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like but we went up, but they did hold Virtual 1 tournaments and we did get another 5-round tournament near the beginning. And it was very interesting. There's a lot of people who just put the virtual superstar specific in their classic deck and kept going
Hmm.
with the classic deck. But a lot of them, a lot of the people who made cuts were people who adapted or tried new things. And again, at the time I was Mr. Perfect. I think Mr. Perfect went like 14-0 over 2 tournaments. It was very, very good. And both tournaments, it was the finals was against I think Joe Booth's Cena at that point.
Oof, yeah.
But like I had played Cena because at the Mike Anstedt was also a Cena fan, so I had played that matchup a billion times in my basement. So like that was fine. I was completely prepared for that.
I
You know,
love
I got
hearing opponent names, BP. I always like I was just thinking about it because you either play around these players a lot and like our group, right? So
mhm.
I'm curious, was there any specific name that stuck out to you in Raw Deal? Like if you got paired up in a tournament in them in Classic, because there's this one that's in my head. I don't, you might remember him, Len Nydorf.
I remember Len.
Yeah.
I didn't. I don't think I played Len much. I do. I've played him once or twice, but I do remember the name. The name stuck out just because it was different.
Yes, and he was, one of those meticulous players. He was a dude love player and would do everything for a reason. And
Hmm.
it just felt like anytime you went up against Len, like it just
Yeah.
you're already behind. So it's just always
Hmm.
interesting to hear older names.
Yeah. I mean, I there was so many players. I thinking about this episode that I just like Candy,
Hmm.
Jimmy, O'Brien,
Hmm. Rest,
obviously Anstedt, Resk, McKelvey. Oh, who was the other guy? Who was the guy who played Piper from Poison Clan? I can't remember his name, but I see his face right now.
Piper. I'm trying to remember other clan members. Sporn was one of them. But
Foreign, I remember, but that
I don't know
wasn't
if that was
him.
him.
No, it
Was he
wasn't.
the
Yeah.
was he the V1 champion, world champ?
Who?
Who was the V1 world champ?
But to your point, BP, there are so many good players
Oh yeah,
in Raw
I
Deal. It was
and
going to a big tournament was just an eventual landmine situation.
mhm. And it's kind of like Worlds now, where the difference at the top players was the fractional things, those
Hmm.
little tiny things that make the big difference. And like the players at the top of those tournaments had them. Um, Justin, I think it was Justin Cantor. Well,
Oh, that sounds familiar. Yep.
yeah, he was one of my finalist opponents in Dark Tower. That was Vengeance era.
Oh,
He was
mhm. Go ahead.
he was Jerry Lawler. I was 2-man, and he won the coin flip for All About the Game, which is kind of how that matchup went.
LaRoche was another great player.
LaRoche, I remember him.
Andrew Trebbing, I think. I don't know
Remember
if you remember.
Trebbing? Yeah.
I went to Philly with him. We hotel together, me, him, and our G kid. Um,
Okay.
it just, I think one of the most amazing things about Classic, and Hog, you said this earlier, is how vivid everything stands out in my mind. Each era um, is so ingrained. You remember the top decks, you remember the times and the moments, and as someone who has one of the most fleeting memories, um, it's incredible how much sticks and hangs on. Uh, George, I'm sure you heard RG tell the Iron Will story, Flair versus Los G's 1,000 times. Basically, Flair overturned an Iron Will on a clutch that prevented him from going into the apply, and then he lost all of his fortitude as Los G's, and that was in the finals of a massive tournament against BP against John Masek.
Yeah, Masick is the guy I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah, you are correct. Masek, I forgot he was in Poison Clan.
I
So
I remember visiting the comicimages.com/raw deal every day and just looking
oh
for
god,
Ask Baron and any spoilers that are coming up.
Ask
And
Baron was my favorite. Oh my god, so blessed when that stuff came out.
yeah, I mean, it was basically my homepage for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just the best days, staying up until 3 or 4 in the morning the night before a tournament, and then going, at 9 a.m. I'll never forget the first time we started going to neutral ground. McKelvey would drive us in, and my parents were like, "Well, we got to meet this guy." And me as like a young 16-year-old, I'm like, "What do you mean? Let this random 22-year-old that you've never seen drive me into the city, and don't worry about it, all right, guys? Totally
I mean,
normal."
technically the bus and train are driven by random people you don't know, so the logic tracks there.
Yeah,
So luckily, my mom would drive us to the mall where we would play with our play group, and the play group guys were like 3, 4 years older than us, so pretty much the same thing. When we were 15, 16, they were 21, 22. So like my mom had met these people, and when my friend decided we were going to drive to New York City for the World Qualifier tournaments, because we couldn't drive at 15 or whatever it was.
that's great. Yeah, just very vivid. That's how I describe classic. Very vivid. You remember the highs, RTC, China. It's like impossible to even rank what's, the worst of the worst.
I just remember like another like one of those weird memories is so like I said, me and my buddy would split a case. I just remember the massive pile of starter deck sleeves or whatever,
Yeah.
the packs, just the open packs, just a giant pile of them on his table.
We would all gather in one of our parents' basements and play game. Two would sit there, two would sit there, and you'd always have to search for cards. So anytime you came, it was just a tornado. It was cards everywhere,
Oh
and you
yeah.
would step on pile through the holes that you were sitting in to go and play your game. Um, just really the best of times. Really, really good memories.
Yeah, I agree.
And now we
That's
got to pay bills.
Now we try and pay. Yeah, I mean, in Premiere, I remember with all of the guys, we would take turns going on groups of 3 shoveling houses, and that's how we would make enough money to split a box. And it was 3 people. Sometimes someone didn't get a foil; they would take best rare. But you did what you could do to get the $60.
when boxes were only $60.
Yeah. Weirdly, we got it off eBay sometimes, like in 2000. I don't know. Feels early for that, but that's how we would do it sometimes.
I came back when I remember them spoiling Virtual 7. I remember seeing like Wyatt family spoilers. This is before I was in playing Virtual.
Mm.
And eventually my friend was like, let's try Virtual 1. So we played Virtual 1 for a little bit, and then we introduced 2 and 3. And then we were going to introduce 5, and we just said, whatever, let's just do all of them. And that was probably around Virtual 9.
Yep.
And then Virtual 10 was my first on the dev team.
We know.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on how the game has evolved then from the end of Classic to where we are in Virtual?
BP, why don't, if you could start, because you were kind of there for the beginning of it all, and have the largest picture. I'd love to hear that.
It was. I described the end of Classic as you either played the busted deck or you played the deck that countered the busted deck if you wanted to win. Like those were kind of your options. You were either Premier Raw or you combated Premier Raw at Divas, for example. Virtual 1 had this freeing feeling where like everybody got something. It didn't matter that X-Pac hadn't wrestled in 8 years. Didn't matter that like there was no Macho Man in Classic. it was just this feeling of like, wow, this is like everything we've kind of wanted from Raw Deal. You know, obviously WWE has a lot of a say in how that works out because they tell us they approve the products in the original print run. You know, now with what was happening with Virtual One, it was like, oh wow, we got this wide open world. And I think at the time we were all kind of happy if that was the closure. Like everybody would get one card, and then there was some other cards to fix things and call out, have a nice day. But then when they started coming out, it's like, well, we can do more. We can do more. Like you're happy with what you have until someone shows you more. And then you're like, well, yeah, let's do more. Let's get the Shield in here. Let's get the Wyatt family. Let's get, we haven't had Bruno. We got pictures of Bruno finally. Let's get him in.
Wasn't the idea after each virtual set up to Virtual 5 that this is going to be the last set of Raw Deal? This is the farewell set. And
Definitely,
then
what 100% Virtual One. That was what
yeah.
they said. Virtual 2 was an outlier because it was designed by an outside third party. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the 8 superstars in Virtual 2 was kind of like a submission, and Creed at the time and Nate Weiss were just kind of like, yeah, we'll balance it out and we'll throw it out there. They seem fine. And then I don't know where Virtual 3 came from. And I know
I remember Creed said something about Virtual 5 is so large because it was going to be the last set.
Mhm.
And then
that probably is true, but I will say that Virtual 7 had the same problem and we kind of knew it wasn't going to be the last set. So
yeah.
that might be.
That was also
sometimes when you try to do too much.
Sets also didn't come out as frequently as they have been recently.
Yeah, Virtual 7 took almost 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
Because I remember we started Shield and Wyatt's really early on the testing side of things. And then it took forever to get to the next phase, which was, I think, like the Mark Henrys, Miz's, and Daniel Bryan's of the world, like the non-remake new superstars. But each phase just took a really long time to get through, in part because we were less people, and in part because I don't know, maybe we were busier at the time. We were trying to have lives. I don't know, but ultimately Virtual 7 was huge.
Mhm.
And I think that was the last set Creed and Nate, I believe, were in charge. I think Virtual 8 is when Eric took over.
Eric took over for 10.
He took over for 10? Okay,
Yeah.
my mistake. So it was Virtual 8 and 9.
It was Eric who brought me on.
Okay. So they did Virtual 8 and 9, but
Eric's general idea was smaller sets with more frequent releases.
Right. And I think at this point we've reached kind of a blend of both worlds, right? Like the small set release is the then now forever sets, for example.
Mhm.
And then you've got the bigger overall set release, which, hopefully we could stick to one a year.
And
as long as
typically it's like every other year there's non-specifics, which obviously take the longest to test.
Mhm. But sometimes specific support is pretty long too.
As far as then and now, maybe I'm biased because I'm on the dev team, but I feel like the game overall is more balanced now than it was at pretty much most any time in Classic. Classic had its levels, but there was always the top end guys each set that, if you weren't Andre the Giant, you probably weren't going to win in Great American Bash unless your opponent was Piper or, something. Whereas now it's like, I think with the frequent support that everyone gets, like if someone's bad, we throw support cards at them to boost them. So I think superstar wise, the game is relatively balanced. There's obviously the top end guys that exist still.
Yeah, you're not trying to sell product too, though. You're not trying to build product in a way where you're pushing people to buy the new stuff. So it's easier to balance it then, where you're not like, well, we need this new superstar. We want him to be really good, we want people to go out and buy packs and stuff to get this type
Yeah, we're
product,
kind of pushing the game more than we're pushing the product, you know.
which is the benefit of it being a free to play product.
You know.
It's all about the game now. It's no longer about making
Right.
enough money to keep the game in print, type thing.
And another advantage we have over printed classic is that we can revise cards. They couldn't release an entire set and then, oh, this card's broken, let's re-release it. I think they did that maybe once or twice with random things to fix different stuff, but
Blindside maneuvers, yeah.
we can
SS3 was a giant remake set.
we can in real time fix something immediately, really.
Yeah, because you have the revision set that usually comes out every year too, which is just a
Yeah.
bunch of revisions of different cards or errata like you did last year.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think kind of what you were saying, Evan, was it's flattened. The top is flattened, and the top was a large peak in classic, and what I've seen is the power is a lot more spread out. I think power as a whole is up, but you can very easily argue that power, when spread out, when everyone has power, you know, it's really just allowing you to play the game, and everyone has an opportunity, which
I
was
remember
not the case in Classic.
Ponder said it perfectly. He said we raise all boats with
Mhm.
virtual. So
Yep.
we make everyone better and try to balance those scales.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember we were still in Classic at this point, and I had finally just gotten Jay-Z and RG on the Discord, and I think the first thing that we three as a group had kind of came to the brought to the table was Booker Man's V1 card, right? We were obviously very scarred from Booker Man, effectively playing against him for 3 years straight in Classic, from when we first came back to the game. And ultimately, what seems like a powerful card in one meta or environment is not the case when you add everything that's going on. And you could argue that he doesn't even need to pack that venue. Where we were like, well, why would you give someone like Booker Man this much support? Well, in the grand scale of it, it's just not worth what you can do elsewhere.
Yeah, it always feels better too, like when you balance any type of thing to give something more power versus to take it away.
Hmm.
You'd rather make everything something more powerful to match it than reduce something powerful. Like you see that a lot in like video game balancing and things like that. You'd rather
That's
see you'd rather see things get what they call buffs rather than a nerf.
Mhm.
that's something I try to keep in mind when we're designing new superstars or new cards is that I'd rather release this at a 6 out of 10 and revise it up to an 8 out of 10 if we have to,
Hmm.
rather than release it as a 10 out of 10 and have to bring it down.
Yeah, because then it
It's a
feels
lot easier.
bad.
It's a lot easier to make something better, even if it's indirectly,
Like
than it is
Gender
to
and Crown
go
Jewel.
flat naked.
So actually, on Joe, on that point, I'm curious because we have Evan here. Um, I know one of the things that I'm always curious about in development that I've seen effectively dropped from Classic is drawback for cards, right? A lot of people's cards might, Collegiate, and Collegiate's a very good card, so I'm not complaining about the cost by any stretch of the imagination. But it's like discard 3, right? Where now to get things going for some people, for newer people versus older people, there's not a lot of drawback or risk in doing something. So I'm curious, like, is that something intentional where you're like, even something discarding a card, to trigger a search from a backstage, which can't be dome tried. Like, is there like what's the thought process from like a development standpoint?
I mean, it's kind of a case by case basis. We want specifics to have some level of protection,
Hmm.
just because it's your superstar's thing.
Right, it makes you what you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, when we make a new superstar or a new specific, we got to keep everything in mind. And we have to keep in mind what happened, how reversible is this? How much does it suck if this is reversed? And should this be more reversible if it's a really good card? Like a lot of times a card will be designed and this is really good. Let's make it multi so it's easier to reverse now.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yep,
something
yep.
like that.
True.
So I mean, drawback. There's still I can't think of one off the top of my head now, but I feel like we still have some drawbacks in the game still. One thing I've been kind of pushing since I've joined is consequences.
Mhm.
Whereas I feel like before the game was just who's the better red wall and you're gonna win.
Mhm.
Whereas now with stuff like Puncher's Chance or technical prowess or stuff like that, things happen when your stuff's unsuccessful, which didn't really happen that much in Classic.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, and it is one of my favorite things because it just kind of flips the game on its head, right?
Yeah,
I
I think we've tried to make the game more strategy based
Mhm.
rather than I have better cards than you,
Mhm.
which a lot of what Classic was.
Yeah,
Right. I
Th-
mean, there
this
was a money factor to Classic. You had to own the cards. You couldn't proxy them.
yeah,
Like that was a big deal too.
And in Classic, if you could reverse something, you generally did because unless you very strategically needed to be lower fortitude to play shoot lockup.
Mhm.
But now I feel like there's a lot more strategy in letting a maneuver hit than there was back
100%,
then.
definitely.
Mhm.
Mhm.
This drawback conversation, by the way, was the backdoor Damien Sandow conversation, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, overall, I think the game is in a arguably the best state it's ever been. Everything's fun. Um, there will always be a top tier, right? Like
Mhm.
it's always going to happen, and arguably there should be. Um, certain people, Seth Rollins, arguably one of the best wrestlers of this generation. Why not have him be one of the best in Raw Deal? Um,
Right.
and that was one of my favorite things about Classic too was, it didn't always represent RTC wasn't the best in the world, but with with Classic you had Triple H and Austin, and they were just on top. They were kings. It's cool to see how it translates to the card game.
I always enjoyed the raw deal trope of no one likes this person, so let's make them really good so people have to play as this person.
Yes.
I think that started with Right to Censor probably.
Well,
Well,
right to
that
censor was Steve Barron was friends with Stevie Richards.
yeah,
I think
and
that because
Comic Images didn't want them in, or sorry, WWE I don't think
WWE.
wanted them in, and Baron's like, trust me, it'll be worth it.
But I feel like Rene Dupree kind of fits that.
Hmm.
Dupree wasn't necessarily a fan favorite, but he had such a good ability and cards and stuff like
I,
that.
I loved him at a time. That free recursion like that, even in a cell. I don't care about the heat was not prominent. Removed from the game was not prominent. Uh, if you were able to get, that was one of the earlier. If you get to 10 fortitude, you should be okay kind of decks, even with one manager.
And I think we still kind of do that with certain virtual people that get released. Like, this person's not the most popular, but we're gonna make them good because number one, we have no reason to make bad cards. Like, there's no
Mhm.
reason to make common and uncommon quality cards
Hmm.
because we're not selling the product.
Right.
Uh, but also, like, we want everyone to be played. So, like, Naomi, for example, isn't anyone's favorite wrestler, but she's real good in Raw Deal.
Zack Ryder.
Still waiting on that Naomi deck, George.
He's
When
been building it for 2 years.
foils are in the image pack, I said it when foils are in the image pack, I'll do it. I had it printed. I was going to build it before we made the switch over.
Well, a lot of the foils are in the image pack. Not
That's
all,
true.
of them, but a lot of them are.
And we need we need the SS3 versions of some cards. I think like Sustained and Overshot. I think are two of like the ones that stick out.
Spit at opponent.
But Overshot's funny because we know a lot of us that have been around, we know what Overshot is, right? Then some of the players who came after the game, right? I think Rose might be one. I think I played Overshot on him, and he's like, that's not D0. I'm like, it is D0. The SS, because he doesn't know. He's never seen it.
Yeah.
Like, I have the physical card right here. I'll send you a picture. I promise it's D0.
Another one of those SS3 revisions.
Right. For me, I feel like, and I'm not saying it's a detriment to the game, but I think that there's just a lot of unresponsible stuff on stuff that you can't respond to. And I think Ponder touched on it the other day, where because Sidewalk came out for irreversible, the unresponsive is like the next phase of it. And in some cases it's not a lot, and the people that have it, it's like one thing to get them going, and that's perfect. And then there's these one-offs that I see that I'm like, okay, how many times can this be unresponsive? And I know that Mean Gene for a while was one, and I truly don't think Mean Gene is that bad now, and quite honestly. But and I know, Evan, I know I said this to you, but thinking of British Bulldog being able to play that unresponsive mid-match cornet endlessly seems like a lot of unresponsiveness. And I'd see that, and that's just one recent scenario. But when they have something, sure. But my thought is like when they can do something unresponsively 4, 5, 6, 7 times, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think on that note, overall, I understand the concept of unresponsive. It makes complete sense. These are people's few chances to have an impact in the game. Um, and I think like anything in either raw deal or life, it's a matter of like containing it to, a certain amount, or maybe Bulldog shouldn't be repeated effects of it. I don't remember how he removes it, but I know he does somehow.
His ability removes a ring backlash card.
Right, right. So I know there's intent there, right? Those are all decisions that you're like, well, do we want this to happen? Do we not want it to happen? But I mean, Bulldog's the only one that I've seen repeated response. But there can be games or issues, and I agree with George. Mean Gene is far from a problem. That heyday I think is come and gone. So it's not like too bad in any one instance. It would just
I
be
also
like, sorry, go ahead.
no, finish. You can finish.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a matter of like what the cards do. Now, the cornet mid match is 2 random from hand to bottom, draw 1. It's a net -1. So like I don't think it's very strong, but I don't think it's like the greatest thing in the entire world. There's an after effect. So I think it's just a matter of like how much does an unresponsive do, right? Because if you can't control it, then what can you do to then like counter what's gonna come your way? It's a balance ultimately.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
think a great example of that is Kofi Kingston. If you look at his cards, I think that was, kind of what you're talking about. Yes, Kofi Kingston has 2 unrespondable actions, but the only thing those actions do is ace do something. So the only point of your responsibility is just to make sure they hit the ring. So like I think that's kind of an example of what you're talking about, where you have that container of it all.
Yeah, there's very few non-specific irresponsible cards. I mean, Mean Gene aside, I think that might be all of them off the top of my head that I can think of.
Yeah.
So it's generally, we try to contain them as much as possible because it is a super powerful effect. I mean, this is a very loose spoiler, but in the next set, there's a superstar specific 0 fortitude vanilla action that is draw 1. Your opponent cannot respond to your next card. So like you have to hit the 0 fortitude vanilla action, but if you do,
Mhm.
and you get a free shot at whatever. So it's kind of stuff like that where it's like if this goes through, great, but it's very easy to stop with one volley this.
Well, I like that you threw in the draw 1 just so it could be tagged by shoe counter. Appreciate that.
Um
This is part of the great thing about the revisions and stuff though too, because like you look at Odor's deck from last year Worlds was abusing the unresponsive way to play judo chokes into ring, And because you can do revisions, you were able to see this and fix it. So, and to bring it more in line with what it's supposed to do versus what it ended up ultimately doing. Because with 500 superstars and however many cards there are out there now, you're never going to be able to test every interaction to know every way people build them.
I was also going to point out that throughout the game, there's been different versions of cannot respond because, in Premiere, leaping knee to the face was a
Mhm.
quarter of your deck gone
Yeah.
automatically because there's nothing to stop it.
Mhm.
Or Undertaker sits up, basically, you lose
See
the
ya.
game next turn. I'm going to put you through the ring T-bone Tazplex.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a cannot be reverse action into a cannot be reverse maneuver.
That's the good stuff.
So like, and
Turn aside
then
half hour.
oh yeah, with Bubba Ray Dudley, that
Oh
was
yeah.
me.
That was my buddy's. That was my buddy's deck.
Now
That's
he's
Classic, classic
Yep.
Eugene. There you go. You want a deck
So,
full of
but
unrespondable.
but then they released Fortitude Surge, they release Beating the Odds, they release Not According to the Fine Print, eventually Sidewalk Slam.
Beating the odds might be one of the best eras. I mean, really, just what a little card to make such a big difference.
So we've been, there cannot be responded to. There will never be a direct counter to that. That will always be a protected entity. So like there won't be a sidewalk slam for cannot be
Right.
responded to cards. But if something is too powerful, then we just switch it to cannot be reversed or whatever the logical thing would be.
Mhm.
I think the it's never an instance where a card is one time. I think it's when it's multiple, right? Like
Yeah.
think of the
Well,
classic days,
Mhm.
and I'm guilty of it. Rochester, right? You sit there and you Rochester all game. What kind of game is that, right? And I think that's and then Viscera obviously comes to mind. We don't need to talk about Viscera again, right? There's 6 of them. It's 6 times, not one time.
right.
But then even BP just especially Ginger's action, right?
Oh
He
yeah.
discards it and he gets to play it next turn. He plays it
Zero
again.
foot
Next
action that
turn he plays it
resolves to this
again.
ringside. Yep.
And that's where it's and again I know we're only talking a handful, right? But even those handfuls of like you see something irresponsible 4, 5, 6 times a game, I think that's where for me that's where my gripe is.
Yeah.
Again, not and it's very small. Unfortunately, that small world is Oder, and he's my nemesis right now.
so George counters irresponsible by playing decks that pick up heat cards so he can chuck, heat maneuvers every turn you can't play reversals to.
No,
George,
you can play when Hell Freeze is over. You can play Oversell. You can play No Sell.
I,
They're
I
all
just
there. I,
Step
I
aside.
actually I wanted to say this earlier. So my last thought. I know, Evan, you dealt with a lot of griping from me from when we moved from V1 up, right? And it took a long time to kind of reflect why, right? Like I'm sitting here thinking, why am I so frustrated with this? And it was because I played only at the beginning of Raw Deal and I got back when every card was available, right? So there was no, for me, I never had the evolution of meta shifting when sets come out. I came back and it was no show into showtime, into shoot lockup, shoot counter. It was the same stuff. And I learned that as we started creeping up through virtual, that it involved meta shifting. I still think ECW with kitchen sink is insane. I hate it. I still hate it to this day. I'll never get over it. But now that we've actually moved our way up, and playing sets where now we're live when new things are coming out, I understand it now. I understand that you shift your meta,
I
and
I think another part of it with your group when you guys came into virtual was that one of you would find some interaction and then the rest of you would say, "Oh, that's great." So then all of you are playing against very similar games over and over and over again, and that naturally gets frustrating when you're losing to, Shane O'Mac with Mean Gene, for example. And then the next person uses Mean Gene with someone else, and then the next person uses Mean Gene with someone else. and you're constantly losing to turn the tide and all this other stuff.
Hog, that
So
chain
I
deck
think
never won.
I think once you guys advanced and caught up, and the card pool expanded so much more, I think you guys in your group are seeing less and less of the same interactions. And on top of that, you are now playing a global audience.
Mhm.
So George can post in looking for game channel, and someone from Singapore says, "Yeah, I'll play," which isn't part of your normal play group.
Well, and that's what made those classic tournaments like a neutral, because it was such a hodgepodge of metas. Effectively, we can train against each other all we want, and we might know how Poison Clan plays, but when you have to factor in Dark Tower and Poison Clan and all these other people at uh, at neutral grounds, like it changes things. It reveals really a much larger picture of the game in its entirety.
And I think one of the best things to happen to Raw Deal is Octagon,
Hmm.
because now you can play all these different metas anytime, really. And from a design point of view, for like Brian and I, like my play style is different than Brian's play style, which is different than, Odor's play style. I noticed the Singapore crowd tends to be more, I don't want to say combo based, but they have a very clear kind of game plan as to what they do. Um, I know, like Mike, the Scottish team, they tend to try to reverse every single thing that you play if they can. So they kind of red wall you, or they generally try to red wall you. Um, so you have all these different kinds of philosophies on deck building and gameplay that when you're playing with your three buddies at home, you didn't really get.
I would have to agree with that. There's some not even before Octagon, when we started to get into the Zoom games, and I played people in Michigan, Joe, Devin, for a while. Then Canner and his group all came in, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a game of Raw Deal I've never even seen before. How does Where it's just this, it's all ringside play, and I've never, no one around me played it. You see it and it expands, and like, oh, now you're packing thrust-knee lifts, and then next thing you know, it just continues. Steel chain shots, I think, were the big one. Steel
And
chains and thrust-knee lifts, right?
and you know what?
Skill chains,
Once
baby.
in a while, the dev team gets it wrong.
Ooh, say that again. Are we recording? Just kidding.
Well,
We call it we know what it does, which is we design a card that's meant to do this, but somewhere in the wording there's a vagary that gets discovered after it's released, that we said, oh, we didn't, that card is vague, you know, do this, do this, do this when that card is blah blah blah. Well, I already referenced three cards, so what is that card? Stuff like that.
I would
Yeah, I mean,
say at least half these days of our design time is spent tweaking the wording with, obviously, with Ponder's help, to be like, we want this to do X. Does this wording say X or does it not say X? Because we all know raw deal English is very different than real English.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of design work that goes into more of these modern cards. And even still, we still have that mental block of, we know what it does. We're only taking, maneuvers into your backstage, I guess, for the recently spoiled card. We knew that in testing, but didn't say that. So yeah.
Well, I've like so we have like an area in Team Canada where we like post our designs, and I've gotten the habit of like if a card says shuffle 5 ringside maneuvers into your arsenal, I try to. The purpose of this card is to shuffle in 5 ringside maneuvers into your arsenal. Like just try to make it as clear as possible. So if someone reads it and says, "Oh, well, you say shuffle 5 maneuvers, but you don't say from where."
gotcha. That's funny.
I'm thinking of that puncher's chance with old school wrestling match that somehow Puncher's Chance modifies an RMS card. But I agree with it.
That's
I get it. I'm not going to argue it
modifying.
because I know what you're trying to do. But I'm like,
It's
okay,
modifying
we'll let it go.
modifying the game action. It's not modifying the card.
Sure, sure. I
It's the
accept it.
same as if someone says, don't discard for your opponent's effects, and they play an RMS card that makes you discard. You're not modifying that card. You're modifying the effect or the game action.
Again,
It
I'm
makes
raw
sense.
deal,
It makes
raw
sense.
deal English. I'm
It
taking
makes
raw
sense.
deal English. I get it. I know it's raw deal English.
It makes sense in raw deal.
We call this the
And that's the other
bionic
thing.
kicking machine theory.
All the
Anybody-
landmines, all the landmines that we have to dodge when we design.
Well, because who finds them? We know who finds them. Jay-Z finds them. Oder finds them. Jagger finds them. Dabu finds them. They find them and they exploit them. They do a great job at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even like exploit. It's how it's presented to them. Like
Yeah.
exploit has this negative
Right.
connotation.
Yeah.
I don't even like that. They use the rules as given to them.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
it's
the same-
meticulous. It's all three of them share the same adjective that I always use. It's meticulous. Everything is done with reason. Not that all of us don't do that or try to do that, but like it's certainly apparent when you're playing them, or at least that's the psyche that it gives off.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a very good memory for cards and effects, and stuff still slips by. So
All right, guys. I think this is a good spot to stop for tonight.
I agree, because I'm still caught off guard from George bringing up Viscera. I wasn't prepared for that.
too
I
soon,
was,
George.
I was hoping I'd tee you up on that one, but you let
Too
it go,
soon.
so I had to bring it back up.
I'll spare Hog.
It's
I'll
too
just say
soon.
that here's what I'll say about it. It ties into the conversation of earlier, right? Like it's not necessarily, although with him it's tough. It's irresponsible into plunge, which is you could argue is like the two worst things, and you're combining them. But then you're kind of like rolling out the red carpet with the maneuvers, and it's just might be a little too much. But Hog, here's what I'll close with is one time I said to you, and I do genuinely mean this. All of this comes from a place of love of the game, and I know how hard you guys, all of you work, and thank you 10,000 times over because as you guys have seen, Raw Deal was everything growing up through high school. It was me and my boys, and um, I was so thrilled that we got back into Classic when we did. I just happened the night before my wedding, I went to my house, I found all my old stuff, texted the boys, and soon after we each chose a random superstar, built the deck. All of it comes from a place of love. I know you guys work very hard at it. None of it is anger towards you guys. Regardless of anything, I
Yeah.
could not be happier with
Yeah.
where things are.
And I don't think I've ever taken anything personally when someone lodges a complaint or anything like that. I don't think I have. Maybe I have.
No, but
But
it's tough. You guys are
Mhm.
working hard, and regardless of anything, you're dealing with words on a screen. There's no tone.
Right.
So I'm just happy I have the opportunity to
The
reflect.
only thing that I know annoys me a little bit is when people say we don't play test because we play test a lot.
Yeah, George
The
will say
NFL
that,
season's
and then
coming. It's
as a joke.
playtest season.
I say that when I need you to answer me. When I see you're ignoring me, I'll say it so I can get an answer out of you.
I mean, I say it too. We don't play test. What's that? I design. I don't play.
Well,
Without Raw Deal, you guys wouldn't know me. And that's all I have to say about that.
Ooh.
You can't put that on Evan.
Just kidding.
well, thank you guys for the conversation again tonight. It was really fun to hear about the classic stuff, especially Brian and Canner and your war stories.
Huh.
So we'll have to do this again. Another walk down memory lane another time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was
Absolutely love
great.
to. It's all flooding
And,
back, so
good
more
luck
stories to come.
Good luck to the two of you that are still in top cut of Wheel of Death.
Next time we speak, there will only be one. It's guaranteed.
May the
Correct.
better Joe win.
Correct. Couldn't agree with Hog more. Good luck, Joe.
Take care, guys.
All right, fellas, have a good night.
Take care.